Did you know that 1 in 10 people in their 20s show narcissistic traits? Yep, narcissism is on the rise. But here's the real deal. Is it just modern culture that's fueling this self-obsession? Or is something deeper going on inside our heads? Hello, Brainiacs, and welcome to Brainwaves. Today, we're going to break down how your brain might actually be behind these narcissistic tendencies. How does the brain shape our behavior? And why do some people become more self-centered than others? Let's dive in. Section 1. Introduction to Narcissism. So, what exactly is narcissism? Most people think it's just about being vain or obsessed with yourself, but it's more complex than that. Narcissism is a personality trait where someone has an inflated sense of their own importance, a need for admiration, and a lack of empathy for others. But here's where it gets interesting. There's more going on in the brain than you might think. It's not just about taking too many selfies, although if you're hitting that post button on your 25th picture of the day, you might want to listen closely. Narcissism exists on a spectrum. At the extreme end, there's narcissistic personality disorder, NPD, a serious mental health condition. But even without NPD, many people exhibit narcissistic traits to some degree. So, what role does the brain play in all this? Section 2. The role of the brain in narcissism. Recent studies have shown that certain parts of the brain are more active in narcissistic individuals, shaping how they perceive themselves and others. Two key players here are the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala. These regions of the brain are crucial in regulating self-awareness, emotions, and empathy, basically everything that makes us human. But when these areas work a little differently, it can lead to behaviors we recognize as narcissism. Section 3. The prefrontal cortex, the brain's CEO. First up, the prefrontal cortex. This area of the brain, located right behind your forehead, acts like the brain's CEO. It handles things like decision-making, planning, and most importantly, self-regulation. This is the part of your brain that helps you control your impulses and think about the long-term consequences of your actions. So basically, the prefrontal cortex is the voice that says, maybe don't post that 7th selfie today. But in people with narcissistic traits, the prefrontal cortex is believed to be less effective at emotional regulation. It struggles to process self-awareness and empathy, which leads to that me-first attitude. Narcissists often overestimate their own abilities and underestimate the impact their actions have on others. For example, when narcissistic individuals receive criticism, their prefrontal cortex has a harder time processing it rationally. Instead, they may react defensively, feeling threatened or lashing out. Section 4. The amygdala, the brain's emotional center. Now, let's talk about the amygdala. A small, almond-shaped structure deep in the brain that's responsible for processing emotions, particularly fear and threats. It's like the brain's emotional alarm system. For most people, the amygdala helps regulate responses to emotional situations, but in narcissists, it can be hyperactive. In narcissists, the amygdala often overreacts to perceived slights or criticism, So, when you criticize someone with narcissistic tendencies, their amygdala sounds the alarm, and their response is exaggerated. It's why they might feel threatened by even mild feedback, or react aggressively to any challenge to their self-image. It's like their amygdala is constantly saying, "How dare you question my greatness?" On top of that, there's often reduced communication between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex. This means narcissists might feel intense emotions, but their brain struggles to calm them down or make sense of them rationally. Section 5. The rise of narcissism in modern society. Now here's the big question. Why does it feel like narcissism is on the rise in today's world? Is it the brain alone? Or is something about modern society pushing us toward narcissistic behavior? Studies show that social media and our hyper-connected, image-focused culture play a huge role. Platforms like Instagram and TikTok encourage us to seek external validation, whether it's through likes, comments, or follows. And here's where the brain comes in again. Every time we receive positive feedback online, our brain releases dopamine, the feel-good chemical. This encourages us to repeat the behavior. Over time, some people become hooked on this feedback loop, reinforcing narcissistic traits like attention-seeking and grandiosity. But here's the kicker. Narcissism isn't just about self-promotion or vanity. It's often rooted in insecurity and the brain's attempt to protect its fragile self-image. Underneath the surface, there's usually a constant need for reassurance. Section 6. Key insight. Brain activity and narcissism. One surprising finding from recent research shows that narcissistic individuals often have smaller gray matter volume in areas of the brain linked to empathy and emotional regulation, like the anterior insula. This may explain why narcissists struggle to put themselves in other people's shoes and respond more impulsively to emotional situations. In fact, this diminished brain activity could be why narcissists have such a hard time feeling empathy for others. Their brains are simply wired to prioritize their own needs first. This research helps explain why narcissists behave the way they do in relationships, struggling with long-term emotional connections, feeling entitled, and often lacking in genuine empathy. Section 7. Recap. How brain function influences narcissism. Alright, let's recap what we've learned about how narcissism and the brain are connected. The prefrontal cortex, the brain's CEO, struggles with self-regulation and empathy in narcissistic individuals, leading to inflated self-importance and poor emotional control. The amygdala, the brain's emotional center, overreacts to criticism or threats, which explains why narcissists can be defensive or even aggressive when their self-image is challenged. Social media and modern society feed into these narcissistic tendencies by reinforcing attention-seeking behaviors and external validation through dopamine hits. Section 8. Implications for personal growth and societal change. Understanding the neurological basis of narcissism doesn't just give us insight into why people behave the way they do. It also opens the door for personal growth. By recognizing the brain's role, individuals with narcissistic tendencies can seek help, whether through therapy or lifestyle changes, to improve their empathy and emotional regulation. Encouraging self-awareness and reducing the glorification of narcissistic behavior in our culture. If we want to move toward a more empathetic world, it starts with understanding what's happening in the brain and how we can rewire it for the better. So what do you think? Is narcissism just a product of our modern world, or is it hardwired into some people's brains? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your take on this. And if you're curious about more psychological insights, check out our next video, where we dive into how social media is affecting our mental health and what we can do about it. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next video.